Boss said we must take lunch at 12:00, so we did. At my old job, we used to have flexible lunch breaks. You could go anytime between 11:30 and 2, as long as someone was covering. It worked just fine. Then a new manager comes in and says, everyone must take lunch at exactly 12 o'clock. No exceptions. Okay then, let's see how this goes. 12 o'clock hits and we all just walk away. Phones are ringing, customers are mid-sentence, but hey, not our problem, right? The boss looked panicked, trying to handle it all. By the time we got back, it was a complete mess. And guess what? The next day, there was a new rule. Lunch between 11:30 and 2 is fine. Oh, so back to normal? Cool, boss. Am I the asshole? User 0 says, the lesson here for new managers is to avoid making changes right away. Regardless of the reason for the previous person leaving or the position being open, allow the current team to operate as they have been for a while. Learn their habits, abilities, commitment, and personalities. Then use that information to adjust schedules, priorities, and responsibilities. Simply sit back and observe for a bit. Walking in and changing things in the first day or week can come across as superior and entitled. Get to know the company and team before doing anything, aside from finding out where the kitchen and restrooms are.
User 1 says, some folks aren't meant to lead.
User 2 says makes you wonder what they were trying to achieve by setting a strict rule.
User 3 says, this issue arises at my job occasionally, but in reverse, there are no lunches or breaks from 11:30 to 1:30. Great. Now, employees, about 8 to 10 of them, scramble to take their breaks and lunches from 1:30 until the end of their shifts, usually 3:30. This typically lasts about a week, but it resurfaces every 6 months or so. People have short memories.
User 4 says, I wonder what the manager's reasoning was. Did they not stop to think that if everyone takes off at once, nobody's covering phones? Goodness, how inept. User 5 says, my manager walked in on his first day and said that union breaks were no longer available. I went straight to the union president's office, and she came down to firmly address the situation. Guess who got their breaks back? Then he tried to specify exactly when the breaks should be. We used to have a policy where you could take your break when it was convenient, as long as the area wasn't left unstaffed, but he wanted them scheduled at exact times. So, like the original poster, we would put people on hold for 15 minutes if needed, or step away from conversations. Because 10:15 is exactly 10:15. Some people shouldn't be managers, and most managers use up all 3 backup plans in a month.
User 6 says I had a similar situation. We had an unpaid 30-minute lunch break. I lived a couple of blocks away, so I always went home for lunch, fed the cats, and put my feet up on the couch for a bit. Due to the nature of my job, I couldn't just stop a task at noon exactly, and we coordinated with each other to ensure someone was always in the shop to take calls. Everyone got their break, and everything was working fine. Then a new manager came in. I returned to the shop at 12:30 and went out for my unpaid break. We used time cards, so I clocked out, and everything was traceable. All my coworkers knew where I was. I got back to work at 1 o'clock and got reprimanded with a written warning. The whole ordeal. I requested the managers higher up be there for the write-up because I had many questions about our breaks and needed everything verified. The meeting was very awkward. My manager's boss was sending clear signals that maybe this should just be a casual chat. Nope. My manager insisted that my unpaid break was from 12 to 12:30 with no exceptions. I'm still not entirely sure why he didn't intervene and override my manager's poor decision. The next day, I was in the middle of a time-sensitive job when the clock hit 12, and I just stopped, put my tools down, and left. I went home, ate my lunch, and played with my cats. I came back at 12:30, and my manager was upset. I told him I'm not being paid from 12 to 12:30, so I'm not sure what he wants from me. Before I got written up, I would have seen the job through and just taken a late lunch. But, oh well. 2 days later, a memo was sent out by his boss saying that our unpaid lunches are not strictly enforced, and to continue doing what works best for us. My write-up was removed from my record.
User 7 says, it's always the new bosses, who have no idea how things work, and even less of an idea of what they're doing, that want to micromanage people who actually know their jobs, and then get surprised when things go wrong. User 8 says I was hired as the HVAC service technician at a plumbing and heating company. Everyone else focused on installations, so they took their 15-minute coffee breaks, because their jobs often lasted all day or multiple days, making it logical to stop on the hour. My appointments were scheduled every hour, except for travel time. Small city, even with traffic. It was at most 10 minutes across town. The other service technician and I didn't take coffee breaks, because arriving at our 10 o'clock or 3 o'clock appointments and sitting in the van for 15 minutes looked unprofessional, so we opted for an hour-long lunch instead. Our appointments were arranged that way. The owner's wife saw me leave at 12 and return at 12:50 on one of the rare days she came in for accounting, and complained. She said I had to take my coffee breaks at 10 and 3 and a 30-minute lunch. No exceptions. So the next day at my 10 o'clock appointment, I showed up, informed them I was there, but explained I had been instructed by the owners that I couldn't skip my coffee break, and they would have to wait a little while longer for heat, in the middle of winter in Canada. I think it was 5 minutes before my phone rang, and I was told to stop and get inside. Service technicians took an hour lunch. The homeowner was understanding when I explained what had happened.
User 9 says, When I was a third-year law student, I interned at a large firm. My job, along with 11 other interns, was to screen calls from potential clients. A receptionist would answer the call, ask some pre-screening questions, and if they were answered correctly, the caller would be transferred to one of us for further evaluation to determine if there was an actionable case. A new manager, a first-year associate, decided that lunch hour would be from noon to 1 o'clock, no exceptions. All interns had to be back and ready to accept transfers at 1 o'clock sharp. Missing a transfer due to not being at your desk was considered a write-up-worthy offense. The receptionist would not transfer any calls from noon to 1, and that seemed fine. However, what she didn't consider was if we were already on a call when the clock struck noon. Cue strategic compliance. At happy hour a few days later, we all agreed. At noon the next day, those of us on the phone at noon simply clicked end on the call, even if the client was mid-sentence, stood up, and headed to lunch. We continued this for maybe 3 to 4 days before one of the interns informed a senior partner what we were doing at the boss's direction to avoid penalties. An email was sent from the new boss that afternoon, saying she had given it some thought, and that moving forward, we should take lunch as close to noon as possible. Frustrating.
User 10 says, it seems you may have overlooked expressing gratitude for his leadership.
User 11 says, people often advance to a point where they are no longer effective in their roles.
User 12 says this must be false. Who has ever heard of a boss learning a lesson in one day?
User 13 says lunch at my previous job was from 11 to 11:30 for everyone except the receiving department. During my second week, I was talking to a customer on the phone until 6 minutes past 11. Then the mail came, and the receiver was busy with UPS. So I opened the door, helped the mailman, and clocked out at 8 minutes past 11. The owner and president were in the lunchroom and saw all of this happen. I sat down, ate, and talked to the president until 35 minutes past 11. Then went to wash my hands and get back to work, clocking in at 36 minutes past 11. A week later, I was called into the office to talk with the owner and president. I was written up for taking a 36-minute lunch because apparently no matter when you clock out, the system clocks you out at 11. Instead of signing the write-up, I explained that I was helping a customer and the mailman. However, that didn't matter. I asked if they wanted me to take less time than my state-mandated 30-minute break. They insisted that wasn't the case. Yet the president and owner could take as long a lunch as they wanted because they were salaried and could come in late or leave early for any reason. Know your rights, stand up for yourself, and don't put up with nonsense.
User 14 says, years ago, I worked in a lab, and we had a new lab manager take over from accounting. She decided she didn't like the flexible come and go, take breaks whenever attitude of the dozen lab workers and implemented a clock in and clock out system. This annoyed most of us, so we worked strictly by the rules, starting at 9 o'clock, taking a 15-minute break at 10:30, and a 45-minute lunch at 12:30. Unfortunately, this meant that long-running experiments and procedures that needed supervision started to fail, as there was nobody available for the 4 hours some of them required to complete. Productivity plummeted, and the time clock was gone within 2 weeks.
User 15 says I have always found that when a new manager, lead, or supervisor joins your work, it feels like it is their new toy. They want to change things, but often the old way is best. It's important to understand that what has worked well does so for a reason. User 16 says I work on site and am in charge of others. I was caught eating in my van at about 2:30. They asked, "What are you doing? What would the customer think?" I'm the first one on site, setting up the workers for success. I wait for my lunch while others go, to set them up for success in the afternoon. Then I take half a lunch break to eat a sandwich in my van and get reprimanded. I work for myself now.
User 17 says, we used to skip lunch and leave 30 minutes early. Eventually, management said lunch was mandatory at a certain time. A coworker, while fixing a broken plane at the gate with passengers, stopped what he was doing, signed for his work, drove back to the hangar, clocked off for lunch, and sat in his car for 30 minutes with his phone off. Lunch became optional again after that.
User 18 says, before I was promoted to manager, my old boss advised me to spend at least the first 30 days just listening and observing, so I would learn what was working and what needed to be fixed. Best advice I ever received.
User 19 says the new manager's mistake, coming in and making changes just for the sake of change, even when things are fragile and clearly labeled, do not shake.